All right, hey you and welcome. My name is Mike and you're listening to a brand new, or maybe it's old, episode of the That Chapter podcast. I am joined once again. He is sitting across from me. He's wearing an Iron Maiden t-shirt.
I am.
He came second in a Glenn Danzig lookalike competition. His favorite hobby is going into coffee shops and staring at women. He's your problematic fave. It's Dirty Keith. Keith, what's going on?
Not much, man. It's great to be back.
To be back. It's funny that we say it's great to be back when, for our dear listeners out there, it'll seem like
just a week.
Yes, it'll seem like just a week and no time has passed at all. But in reality, folks, if you want to see how the sausage is made, peek behind the kimono or whatever the people those sayings are. We actually haven't recorded in probably 3 more, maybe-ish weeks. I was on vacay, baby.
Yeah, you're on your hollybobs.
I was on my hollybobs. I was in South Korea. Annyeonghaseyo.
Hello. Annyeonghaseyo.
Once again, which is like my favorite place to go to. I'm a big vacationer. I feel like it's one of the few things that's truly worth spending money on is going on holidays.
Yeah.
I'm not a very materialistic person. I just like to travel.
Yeah.
That's like my thing to do. So I always try and Korea is one of my favorite places to go. So I had a delightful time. Once again, I could live there for sure. And you know what the thing is, if I could move to Korea, don't learn language.
Right,
at all.
Okay.
You need to know annyeonghaseyo, which is hello and goodbye. 감사합니다.
Okay.
Which is thank you.
Right.
And then jugule.
Okay, I've forgotten them all already.
Okay. Well, the one you need to know is jugule, which means do you want to die?
Okay.
I know.
Right.
And that's all you need to know.
And you got to run.
And then I do not want to learn anything else because I have learned this from being in a country where they, English isn't the primary language.
Yeah.
They just ignore you.
Okay.
And it's delightful.
Right.
I have no idea what people around me are saying, nor do I care.
Yeah.
And nobody tries to make small talk with you.
Right, yeah.
You're sort of just ignored, and it's so good. It's so refreshing, where you don't really care about anything at all.
Meanwhile, they're walking by like, look at that dickhead.
I know. Oh, they definitely probably are. But it's very liberating to not have a clue what anybody's saying. You're not distracted. You don't really give a shit about what's going on in the news.
Yep.
Nobody's talking about this or that. It's great. Honestly,
Yeah.
it feels like you're in your own little void.
That's what.
You're the invisible man.
You are, nice, and you're kind of your own little bubble, and because I guess even like something might catch your eye that you want to read, you can't even read it.
Exactly, yeah. So no distractions, zero defects, my friends. It's absolutely great. One of my favorite things we did while we were in Korea was we went down to Busan and we went to a baseball game.
Nice.
I've been to 3 baseball games. I love baseball is my favorite sport, and I've been to 3 baseball games in Korea. One in Seoul, one in Gwangju, which is another city, and then one in Busan to see the Lotte. Oh wait, this is a fun fact, by the way.
Okay.
So I'm going off on one of Mike's special tangents. But in Korea, when I think of baseball, the 3 major countries are obviously America, North America, and then Japan. Baseball is huge there too, and Korea. But in Korea, baseball teams are named after companies.
Oh, okay.
That's capitalism for you, baby.
Yeah.
So, for example, in Busan, it's the Lotte Giants. Lotte is a big company that owns everything. There's like Samsung has a team, Kia has a team. Yeah. It's not like, the Seoul whatever.
Yes.
It's all named after companies. It truly is like freaking companies own everything there.
Yeah.
It's like so the Lotte Giants are they are department stores. They make chocolate. They probably make machine guns and rockets too. It's like there's like 5 companies like Hyundai, Kia,
they do everything.
Samsung. They make everything.
Right.
It's very cyberpunky.
Okay.
For anybody out there who's played like the video game Cyberpunk where like Arasaka makes everything. That's what Korea is already like that. But can you imagine if you were in like you went to see the Amazon Dodgers or something like that?
Yeah,
how weird would that be?
It would be weird, wouldn't it?
Yeah, the Apple
real capitalistic
Padres.
world. Like, I don't like this.
Yeah. It's kind of strange when
just
you think
Jeff
about it.
Bezos like as our mascot.
Yeah, you're right. It's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a thing that went viral a while ago when one of the teams, the thing that went viral was them lifting. They won the championship, the KBO, the Korean Baseball League, and they had a giant sword. And people were like, "Oh, that's the Korean trophy." It's not the trophy. They just got it because they won the league, and their owner makes video games. So they got so their like prize was like the sword from the video game.
That's
and it's like one of these crazy like fantasy.
That's better than any trophy.
It was cool.
That's
it
usable.
was cool as all shit.
Yeah.
But baseball games in Korea, wow. I've been to baseball games in the US. You used to go to Toronto.
I did.
You're a Blue Jays fan.
I'm Blue Jays. Yeah.
You used to go to games all the time when you were in Toronto.
Yeah, we used to go on Sundays, a bit of pre-gaming. It was great. Or it was hangover / pre-gaming for next year. But yeah, I loved it. The midday shows, it was awesome.
Yeah. But like in North America, when you're going to a baseball game, it's just like you're sitting there and you're chilling and you're sipping on your beer, you're eating a hot dog. It's very chill.
Yes, it is.
Korea, it's totally different. It is not chill at all. It's up,
I'm on
dancing.
edge.
Yeah. You're in the stadium and the away teams are on one side, the home team is on another side, and both have a little stage in the middle of the crowd where there's cheerleaders who are all like pretty hot.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be weird though, like, so you're supporting your home team, but then like if it's like
they have their own cheerleaders and so there's the cheerleaders, and more importantly there's the hype man who's going around with a microphone dancing and getting people to chant and like showing all the dance moves, and then the cheerleaders is dancing behind him and he's like getting the crowd totally pumped up. Every player has their own chant, every player has their own song. The crowd is like doing all of these moves for special players. You're responding to what's going on. It's not like a chill,
it's an experience.
It's an experience. It's a festival. I swear to God, it is a music festival,
right,
combined with sports.
That's awesome.
It is awesome. It is like so much fun, but you are exhausted by the end of it. So yeah, it was great. I had a great ass time.
Yeah, it sounds great, man.
A lot of fun.
And you showed me all the photos, so I don't need to go now.
No, you do not need to go. You lived vicariously through me.
Yep, that's what I do.
And speaking of living vicariously, how about we live vicariously through you, Keith? So I've been telling you about what's going on with me for the last couple of weeks. What's been going on with you? I don't care. What about the ghost?
We did have a little weird thing in the house.
Everybody wants to know. You had a weird experience.
Yeah, so when we left the house at around midday and then we came back. We were only out for a little short while. We came back like in about 2-3 hours later.
You just went out for like a walk?
Yeah, we just went out for a walk just around the park. And when we were coming back in, I walked through our living room. And then something caught my eye. And we've 2 big framed pictures on the wall. And there were like 2 of them just perfectly angled away. But it was like so much so that it was noticeable. And I'd been in the house all day and nothing had changed with paintings. And then we left and it came back. It was like weirdly just out of place, as if somebody purposely had moved the pictures on the wall. Just really strange.
Yeah.
But but that's the only kind of weird thing.
Okay.
Might be grasping at straws there, but I thought it was...
Sounds kind of like you are.
I thought it was weird.
That is sort of creepy, though. It's the kind of thing where, it's like, I want you to know that I've been here. Or was I?
Yeah.
Are they trying to drive you insane?
Could be. It's working.
I know. I'm actually starting to wonder that all of these ghostly experiences you've been claiming to have are just undiagnosed mental illness that that we do not know.
Just no podcast. Just in home.
Exactly. I don't even exist.
Just talk about the water cooler.
I feel like maybe we should get you tested for schizophrenia at some point. But we'll leave that for another topic of the podcast.
That'd be actually great. That'd be a good movie. Like this whole time is actually you coming to my bedside each week.
I'm the doctor
to try to bring me back.
Yeah. Dr. Mike once again.
Ooh, what a twist.
Ooh. Well, folks, is it true? You have to wait to find out. And speaking of doctors and hospitals and more specifically bodies, today, folks, we got an old oldie for you. Today is the story of Burke and Hare. This is a story I've wanted to cover. This has been on my list for a long time.
It's a great story.
It's a great story. It's way more. So I always kind of knew the basics of Burke and Hare. Like these, I always thought they were Scottish. They're Irish, actually. Turns out. But it's set in Scotland, and they have a penchant for dead bodies.
Yes.
It's actually a lot more gruesome than I ever thought it was.
Yeah, it is.
And the ending is even more gruesome.
Yeah.
But I think today, folks, we're going to do a big old splish splash deep dive into the story of Burke and Hare.
And I'm excited.
Good. I'm glad you are. So, folks, to set the scene, the world of the early 1800s was a very different place to our modern world. But by the middle of the century, huge strides had been made forward in tech, industry, and, maybe most importantly, and definitely most importantly to today's story, in medicine. When restrictions began to loosen as society became more liberal and the ruling class's grip loosened, with education becoming slightly more accessible, Europe experienced a boom in the sciences. One of the disciplines that received the biggest surge forward was the study of anatomy. Basically, Christian attitudes had been tugging on science's leash for centuries when it came to anatomy, largely thanks to the belief that the body was sacred, which in turn had meant that under law, bodies were not treated like any other property, which I think is fair.
Yeah.
Nobody wants their loved ones being desecrated after death. Edinburgh in the 1800s was regarded as a hub for medical science and attracted researchers from around the world to share their findings right there. Unfortunately, bodies used in medical research, or cadavers to give them their proper name, were kind of on a use once basis. You don't really have after you cut them up, it's kind of hard to put them back together again. Not only that, but the Scottish law at the time dictated that bodies used in dissections and demonstrations must have come from only one of 3 sources. Criminals who died in custody, you can do what you want to them, suicide victims, or orphans, which definitely seems like orphans?
It's so harsh.
Yeah, that seems very harsh. They've already got a bad start.
Right, yeah.
And then it's like, all right, well, your body, once you're out of here, we're kind of good to go. The very fact that those 3 are considered equally disposable, I mean, yeah, as we said, that's really all you need to know about the attitude of the day.
Like, the only thing was that bodies not being considered property also meant that there was a rather huge and, in hindsight, really obvious loophole in the legal system. So if a corpse was buried, should someone, come along, dig it up and say, no, I don't know, maybe sell it to a doctor with a nice shiny scalpel, well then technically there'd be no crime, would there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, technically, you can do that. You can raise the pointer. Technically. Yeah. The rise in body snatching to fill the market gap was huge, and a whole other micro industry sprang up around the practice of stealing dead bodies and selling them for that sweet, sweet kibosh. The body snatchers, known in those days as resurrection men, developed their own personal techniques for retrieving bodies and then selling them on.
Now, while caretakers and custodians came up with, their own ways of stopping these resurrection men, there was a substantial market for products aiming to stop your loved one's body from being pilfered in the days after their burial. A fresh body is the best kind of body, after all. And for anyone using Tinder, feel free to use that as your profile.
That's good.
By the late 1820s, products such as MortSafe, which is essentially a large cage around the grave, and a variety of other insurance techniques, they made the lives of the resurrection men much more difficult to get at those nice fresh bodies.
Yeah, it's really interesting because if you ever go for a walk in like an old graveyard,
you see them. Yeah.
You see these weird things, and you're like, I guess if you don't read into this, you're like, what the fuck is that about? Or you see, these very large and ornate family burial plots, like this Victorian or whatever you call it, 1800s, 1700s, whatever. And it's like, what the fuck is all that about? And then it's like, oh, it's probably just so that nobody would steal their dead body and chop it up.
Right.
That's really probably what most of that shit was for.
I always thought it was the other way around. I thought it was to stop, like, zombies.
Yeah, I know. Keep them in. Keep them in. Don't let them out. So all of these circumstances conspired to give us 2 of the most bizarre and famous, and also infamous, serial murderers of the 19th century, Mr. Burke and Hare. They didn't just steal dead bodies, they made a hell of a lot of their own. And by the way, I just want to say, Keith, before we get into it, you've been to Edinburgh, where our story is set today. Yes. I've never been to Edinburgh, and I've always wanted to go. I heard it's amazing. Everybody's been to Edinburgh. Yeah. In Scotland says it's great.
Let's go together. It's great. It's
fantastic. I know, we should. Maybe we could do a podcast from Edinburgh.
Let's do it.
Apparently it's like one of the most haunted cities in the world.
They've all these it's so haunted. They all these amazing dungeons and stuff. It's great. Yeah, we should definitely go.
Yeah, my brother's been to Edinburgh a couple of times and he absolutely loves it. It's like really, really cool and like gothic looking. Yeah. It looks like Bloodborne from what I've seen. And it's like, and this big like castle. Is that a castle in like the center? Yeah,
big man's castle.
And he said they did this one tour where even he got really freaked out. It was like one of those ghost tours, but there had been like a big fire back in the medieval times, and then they'd blocked it up, and then they only recently discovered it, like rediscovered this, like it was like an old street or something that had been bricked up for hundreds of years, and then they rediscovered it, and it's like super like weird as fuck down there and like haunted and shit. Yeah. Like he said, you feel weird shit down there. Yeah. So I'm excited to go. I'm excited. We should do a live podcast.
That's definitely. I'll show you around. I'll show you my favorite Irish bar that we always go to.
Okay.
I'm the worst tourist.
Yeah.
I'm the worst.
You truly are the worst tourist. I know. You want to try any local beers or any local stuff? Guinness it is. Yeah. You have it home, and it's probably even better back home.
It was dog shit awful as well. It was
in Edinburgh, the Guinness?
Yeah, and I still drank it all night.
Well, of course you did. All right, folks. So thanks to Mr. Burke and Hare. The 2 gentlemen who are make up today's story only a tiny bit more horrific than the other Irishman who went to Edinburgh, Keith. These 2 men, Burke and Hare, they didn't grow up particularly wealthy. Exact records are spotty at best. So we know a little about their early lives, and what we do know isn't exactly nailed on definite facts. Even Hare's exact birthplace isn't 100% known. So let's get into the 2 bad lads who make up today's tale. As I said, William Hare's exact birthplace isn't known for certain, but he was most likely born in either County Armagh, County Derry, or Newry, which lies in both Down and Armagh. This is all in, north of Ireland.
Go on, gives you best accent.
Narn.
That was really good, actually.
Was it?
Yeah, I like it.
All right. Oh shit, I haven't done an accent in a while. Okay, wait. We're not even sure where he was born or as a consequence. That
was really good.
Was that actually not bad? Good. All right, or how old the Earl was. No, I've lost it. Yeah. Shit, okay. So we're not sure where he was born or how old William Hare really was. When he was arrested in 1828, William Hare gave his age as 21. That was most likely a lie. There's very little information on Hare's life in Ireland before he emigrated to Scotland, but best guess suggests he was most likely a farmhand. For 7 years, he worked on the Union Canal, which runs from Falkirk to Edinburgh, after which he settled in Edinburgh sometime in the mid-1820s. By pretty much all accounts, Hare was far from a nice fella. Having basically no education, not even basic literacy, and being quick to throw fists under the slightest provocation, he wasn't someone most people enjoyed having around. William Hare's future and literal partner in crime was William Burke, and he was a very different beast. And of course, folks, as you've probably guessed, both their first names were William, so we will be referring to them as Hare and Burke. So unlike Hare, Burke had a very comfortable childhood, education, and upbringing in general. Born Brendan Dines Burke in 1792 in County Tyrone, Burke was the middle of three and one of the two sons. As teenagers, both Burke and his brother Constantine enlisted in the British Army. After Burke left the British Army, he briefly married a woman with whom he had 2 children and settled in County Mayo. Burke never bothered to formally end the union, however, instead following an argument with his father-in-law over some land Burke wanted. And so Burke did the old midnight flit and crossed the sea to Scotland in 1818, where he changed his name from Brendan to William. As a relatively well-educated man, it wasn't hard for him to find work, though the work he did find was indeed hard. On the Union Canal, which of course is where you might be thinking he would meet Mr. Hare. But he didn't. That wouldn't come until later. Burke did, however, meet a new woman named Nellie McDougall. The two found a home together in Maddiston, a small village outside of Falkirk. Burke and McDougall eventually moved to Tanner's Close in November of 1827, where the couple worked as hawkers of second-hand clothing. Later, Burke set himself up a much better paid job as a cobbler, doing quite well for himself. Unlike Hare, Burke was known locally as being much more pleasant and good-humoured. He was a natural salesman and more than a bit of a showman as well. And one quick aside is I've kind of noticed this recurring theme in our podcast regarding characters in these episodes, which is, as we are Irish, Irish will come up.
Yeah.
They're always the villains of the stories we tell.
It's true. We're always assholes.
We're almost always. So Burke and Hare, and then 2 weeks ago we did the story of Lizzie Borden.
Oh, yeah.
And the maid was Irish.
Yes,
and she was a tattletale.
She was a tattletale, yeah.
Oh my God.
She was a dirty rat.
Yeah, I know. Irish at it again.
Oh, yeah. Rob was drunk as well.
I know.
We're drinking right now. So it was in 1827 when Burke and his missus, Nellie, left her home in Tanner's Close after they'd found themselves seasonal work in Pennycook, a small Midlothian farming town. And that is when Mr. Burke and Hare first met. Now, despite seemingly being chalk and cheese, there was one overriding thing that bonded the two men. Drinking.
Hell yeah.
Burke and Hare quickly became known as drinkers, with Hare often involved in drunken brawls.
And his balls would also be pretty drunk too.
Yeah, that's fair. They all ended up living together in Hare's house. One big happy family.
Now, Hare would take in lodgers into their shared house for extra money. And this, folks, is when things begin to go so horribly wrong. But right for our story. On November 29th, 1827, a lodger named Donald had been unwell with dropsy for some time. Dropsy is the old-fashioned term for edema or swelling caused by a buildup of fluid, in the body. It usually indicates some kind of other underlying health condition, like, say, serious heart failure, kidney disease, or some kind of infection. Donald wasn't a well-off fella financially either, and he relied on his army pension, which was paid quarterly to pay for the lodgings. Unfortunately for Hare, however, Donald was due to be paid shortly after he died. So that meant that Hare was £4 in the red at the time of Donald's death. He died before he could pay them. And it was during a drinking session that Burke and Hare cooked up a scheme to sell Donald's body to a local doctor. Because Donald had died poor and without any immediate family, the local parish took responsibility for the burial, and a local carpenter was commissioned to build a coffin. Burke and Hare waited until his job was done before they took Donald's body, hid it under the bed, and replaced it with scraps taken from a local leather worker's shop before sealing the coffin shut. They then waited until the coffin was taken away for burial, when they would take the body to a doctor at Edinburgh University. At the university, while looking for a potential buyer, the men came across a student who directed them to a doctor named Robert Knox in Surgeons Square. So Robert Knox, the good doctor, would become a close conspirator of Burke and Hare. In fact, it would be fair to say that perhaps without him, the duo may never have taken up their new hobby. As a child, Dr. Knox had contracted smallpox, and it left him severely disfigured and blinded in one eye. He began his life as a physician in 1814, even serving as an army physician at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, just a year after qualifying. After a few years practicing in England, Knox went to southern Africa, where he worked as an army surgeon during the Kosa Wars. He returned to his hometown of Edinburgh in 1820. 5 years later, he became a lecturer in anatomy at the Royal College of Surgeons in Edinburgh. As part of his lectures, Knox, a genuine authority and a well-regarded expert in anatomy, would often perform public dissections in front of medical students. These regularly drew crowds of hundreds of onlookers. That meant that Knox needed a steady flow of bodies. Once Burke and Hare had agreed a deal to sell the body of Donald to the university, they were introduced to Dr. Knox, who agreed on the price of £7, 10 shillings. Now, £7 and 10 shillings would be around £500 today, or a touch over $670 in US, maybe something like that in euros.
Yeah, I think like back then, that sum was the equivalent to more than 5 weeks' wages for a skilled tradesman.
It's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money. Now, thanks to Donald's unpaid lodging fee, Hare, he pocketed the lion's share, £4 and 5 shillings, while Burke received £3 and 5 shillings for his part. Now, Burke, he would later claim that Dr. Knox, or one of his assistants, inadvertently gave them the idea to source their own cadavers going forward, when he supposedly told the men that they'd be happy to deal with them again should they have another body to dispose of.
Wink, wink.
Wink, wink. Now, of course, it's likely that he suggested stealing the already dead rather than, making their own, but that idea seems to have gone right over their heads.
Yeah. It's basically like, if anybody else dies near you, send them my way. Well, what they took. So you're saying we should become serial killers.
I got it.
I got it, Doc. Yeah. Good idea.
Yeah.
Now, this is the point that I kind of have to jump ahead in the story with a bit of a spoiler alert, folks. But this is just very brief. After the eventual, and we'll get to it, this is much later, arrest of Burke and Hare, the men and their wives were offered an immunity deal. And basically that deal would fall to whoever agreed to the deal first. That just so happened to be Hare, which means the best account of the murders we have is according to Hare. Which, as you can probably guess, means, he's gonna tell the story that looks favorably upon him and his wife, while hanging his friend out to dry, both figuratively and very literally. So, the thing about this story is we do have to take a lot of it with a pinch of salt. We're taking it all from somebody who just wanted to look good in the eyes of the authorities. Having said that, the deal he took was an immunity deal, so therefore he could really just tell the truth and nothing bad would happen to him. So we don't really know how true this is. It could be true because he was immune, it could be lies because he just wanted to look good.
Yes, yeah.
We don't know. The major consensus is that the first victim is likely to have been a miller named Joseph, who had lodged in a room at Hare's sometime in late January or early February 1828. Like Donald, Joseph had also become ill, though not nearly as seriously. He'd come down with a fever to the point of delirium, which Burke and Hare were, pretty happy to, not feeling too good there. How about we make you feel even better, fella? Joseph was a former man of means, and had since fallen on hard times. So, after they plied Joseph with a large amount of whiskey under the guise of making him feel better, the men set upon him, and one of them, thought to be Hare, suffocated Joseph, while Burke laid on top of him to restrain him. Joseph, already being ill with a fever, not only offered a perfect mask for his death. By the way, when Joseph turned up dead, wink wink, they didn't say, he died of a fever. They just said he ran away.
Yeah,
he just left instead of giving the excuse they already had. It's very weird.
He was already on death's door.
Exactly.
Yeah. It wasn't a large leap.
Yeah, but for some reason they said, "Oh, Joseph ran away. We don't know what happened to him." Having said that, it also gave them the impetus for getting rid of him so as not to infect themselves or any potential guests. But I will say, I don't think they give a shit about his fever that he might spread around Edinburgh. Not only did the men take the body to Knox the very next day, but they also received a bumper paycheck of a whole whopping £10, thanks to the particular freshness of the cadaver. Dr. Knox was apparently delighted with the body he got, and thanks to the simple smothering method, the actual cause of death would have been undetectable by forensic methods and standards of the day.
Now, the second victim was very likely a travelling salt saleswoman named Abigail Simpson from a suburb in Edinburgh. You miss the old days of a travelling salt woman.
The old travelling salesman. Yeah, no, you needed it because food was just so shit.
That's true.
Salt lady, please come, Abigail.
Simpson was elderly and retired, but used her salt selling to supplement her low income. Now, according to Burke, his wife Margaret Hare invited her to the house on the 12th of February 1828, where she introduced her as an old friend before the team repeated the old whiskey trick and made sure that she was good and plastered to the point where she fell asleep. Oh, yeah, by the way, according to Burke, Miss Hare was very much in on the husband's lucrative new gig. The only problem was that the would-be killers, they also drank too much. And they ended up passing out themselves.
Amazing killer. Well, that's the Irish for you. Can't resist a few ale drops.
I just don't want to stop, having too much of a good time. So when they woke up the next morning, they managed to stop Simpson from leaving by offering her a Hare the dog, and they soon got her smashed all over again.
And themselves while they were at it.
And themselves, they partake a little bit, but this time though they were careful not to overdo it themselves, and they took the unconscious Simpson to the bedroom where Burke smothered her to death using a thick mattress to cover her nose and her mouth. So once she was dead, Burke, Hare and Margaret now moved Simpson's body to an old tea chest, and they transported her to Dr. Knox's office the very next day. So Knox, he had no questions, and he even complimented the men on the freshness of the cadaver. Simpson's body, they earned the duo another crisp £10.
So now at this point, the wives, or at least one of the wives, Hare's wife, Margaret Hare, was getting in on it. So it's Burke, Hare, and now Margaret. She's helping them out, luring people to the house where they will do their evil. I mean, she was looking at them dollar bills, so she was thinking, yummy. She was licking her chops.
Yeah, well, it's just dollar bill, I guess. It's just one crisp £10.
Oh yeah, one £10 note, I guess. Well,
can't really make it rain, but you could try.
You could try. I mean, it's Edinburgh. It's always raining.
Yeah, that's true.
Next came another male lodger at Hare's house, whose name has sadly been lost to time. The little we do know is that the man was from Cheshire, and he had boarded with Hare while passing through Edinburgh as he travelled around selling matches and tinder. Some accounts have the men using Margaret, once again, to lure the man back to the house, just like she did with Abigail Simpson. Burke later alleged that the man was ill with jaundice, so he and Hare used the same method they'd used to dispatch Joseph, to rid themselves of the sick man and earn themselves another crisp £10 note. When the technique of one man laying on the victim's chest and the other smothering them, this later became public, that little tactic of killing somebody would gain the nickname Burking. I bet Hare was so pissed off about that.
Right.
Call it herring.
I know, yeah.
Sounds like something you might do in the bedroom.
Yes, yeah.
Herring, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. So could Burking.
Ooh.
I like to call it murder.
Sometime in the early April of 1828, Burke met two women, 18-year-old Mary Peterson and Janet Brown, thought to both be sex workers, who he lured back to his brother's house. His brother was now also living in Edinburgh, cool Constantine. He lured them back to Constantine's place with the promise of whiskey. When Constantine left and you had Mary Peterson, Janet Brown and Burke, all 2 bottles of whiskey deep, an argument broke out when Nellie McDougall returned and found Burke and Janet Brown closely chatting, leading to Burke's partner Nellie accusing them of having an affair, after which she threw a glass at Janet Brown.
I mean, murder's one thing, but cheating on me?
Exactly.
I won't have it.
That was really the final straw, Can't have that. The glass hit Janet in the face and cut her above the eye. Now, Janet insisted she didn't know Burke was married and hurried off away. Unfortunately, though, for Janet's friend, Mary Patterson, she had passed out in a drunken stupor and not only missed all of the action, but would miss all future action too, as she became the latest victim of Burking. The men put her body in the same tea chest they'd used to transport Simpson and delivered Mary Peterson to Knox in return for £8. Despite the body allegedly being so fresh, it was still warm to the touch.
Even in debt, women are getting paid less.
Despite the lower price, Dr. Knox was happy with the latest donation and stored the body in whiskey for 3 months before dissecting it. Given the way Mary Peterson was killed, really adding insult to injury, not only had they passed her out with a bottle of whiskey, she would remain in a big old glass of whiskey for a couple of months.
Jesus, yeah.
However, when one of Knox's assistants, named Ferguson, remarked, he's seen this woman's body, kept fresh in a bottle of whiskey, a big old vat of whiskey, he was like, do I know her? She looks oddly familiar, and Burke would say, no, this girl drunk herself to death, and he had bought the body from an old woman, in town. The man had probably used poor old Mary Peterson's services in the past.
Yeah.
And having said that, Nellie McDougall, who walked in on, Burke with, the two women, well, she benefited from the murder too. Because she kept some of Mary Patterson's skirts and petticoats for herself. She's like, don't mind if I do.
No one else used them, I guess.
When Janet Brown, the woman who took a glass to the face, and ran away, she later came back, looking for her friend Mary, and Hare told her that she had left with a traveling salesman to go to Glasgow. No doubt Janet, knew this was a lie, but there was no way to prove it, and she simply had no legal recourse available to her. But this, as you probably guessed, folks, this is almost like when Burke and Hare start to get a little bit loosey-goosey with the rules. They almost got caught on this time. Not only had, Burke had tried to have a threesome with these sex workers, his wife Nellie McDougall walked in on him, threw a glass at one of the sex workers so she ran away. They killed the other one, sold her body. One of the doctors recognized her body as a sex worker he had been banging probably previously. And then, the other one comes looking for her. It wasn't quite the open and shut case really for them. Bad move on their part.
Absolutely not. So the next victim, or victims actually, came a mother-daughter duo, and they were actually killed on 2 separate occasions. So soon after the Brown incident and murder, around the middle months of 1828, a Miss Mary Haldane was lodging with the Hares, and once again she was piled with whiskey until she was at the point of losing consciousness. So Mary Haldane, a stout old woman, she was burked, as we'll now call it, after she'd passed out at the kitchen table. Later that year, after Miss Haldane had been missing for several months, her daughter Margaret visited the Hare's property to ask if they knew where her mother had gone. Her true fate was ending up on the Knox's table, but she'd never discovered the truth. Instead, she would join her mother. This was all completely unknown to Hare, as he was away from the house at the time. So just as he had with her mother, Burke threw as much whiskey Margaret's way as he could, and eventually she'd passed out. Burke also took advantage of the moment and smothered her to death. He then employed the good old trusted tea chest method and took her body to Knox, who handed over £8 for Margaret's body. He was unaware of the family relationship between Margaret and Mary Haldane. I don't know, God, with the amount of whiskey they were buying, they must have just been breaking even at this point.
I know, they were applying all their victims with whiskey. I wonder if Dr. Knox, Dr. Knox, when he was given these 2 bodies of the mother and the daughter, he didn't know they were related, but you think he would have been like, she looks kind of familiar.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, so Burke killed the mother Haldane and then daughter Haldane without Hare having a clue. He did this. He was like, you know what? He was going solo. He was like, I can do this by myself, and then I'll get 100% of their profits.
Yeah.
Hare will not be too pleased when he finds out that Burke has been doing a little side action. In May of 1828, Burke did another murder without the knowledge of his usual partner in crime. This time, the victim was an unnamed older woman who was also, again, lodging with the Hares. Burke recalled few details, but did remember receiving £10 for the body from Knox. Having said that, eventually Hare would also go into business by himself, doing a little solo action. They both started, kind of just shows how shitty they both are when they both decided to go into solo action to kind of double cross their partner in crime. Yeah. They both did it separately without knowing that the other one was doing it.
Yeah, it's mad. I wonder if he was while he was smothering, he's like, it's called Harry, not Burke.
Yeah, exactly. This is my thing. Now, eventually, they would discover that the other one was doing it. So they basically found out they were cheating on each other. Right. It's like that song Pina Colada.
Yeah, you know? It's exactly like that.
Yeah, that's basically what Burke and Hare were doing. By the way, Hare's victim, she was a cinder gatherer who went by Effie. A cinder gatherer, by the way, is literally a dumpster diver who sells their findings for a meager profit. So that's the person who he killed, but, they would find out, and this would get into a bit of a kerfuffle for them. They were both pretty pissed off at each other later on.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Now, we kind of mentioned that earlier on that they were getting a bit reckless, but Burke and Hare at this point, they were, that was an understatement how reckless they were getting. Burke was clearly feeling full of himself when he literally took the next victim out of the hands of a policeman. And I mean that literally. So Burke, he never knew her name. He came across her as she was being helped home by a local police constable. The girl, she could barely stand. So Burke, he told the constable that he would be happy to take the girl home himself. Terrifyingly, the officer, he agreed to it.
Yeah, what the shit?
Right?
This is wild.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And he left the girl with Burke. Just like, I was like, oh, you seem like an upstanding citizen. Yeah. Go ahead with this strange man.
Yeah.
And so he agreed and he left the girl with Burke, who took her to Hare's house and then proceeded to murder her. Once again, they made an exchange with Knox's body bank and received another £10. At this point, it's very much worth remembering that these are seriously significant sums of money that we're talking about here. So Burke and Hare had already made over £100. So that's nearly £14,000 in today's money. But the buying power of that kind of money back then, it was far, far greater in real terms as well. So they were making a killing.
Yeah. Literally making a killing by doing a killing. June 1828 was another busy month for the deadly duo, and the second time the men killed 2 members of the same family. According to Burke, they were an old woman and a dumb boy. The dumb boy was the woman's grandson. He was deaf, by the way. It didn't mean like stupid. That was dumb was just, the word back in the day.
Maybe he was, we don't know.
Well, maybe he also was stupid. I don't know. Yeah, good point. The grandmother and young boy were maybe the unluckiest of all. Burke had actually been stalking an old man with the intention of him being the next victim, but while he was walking the man back to the Hare's property, the woman and her grandson, they just happened to stop Burke, asking him for directions. He jumped at the chance of a twofer and told the woman he would take them anywhere they wanted to go. Unlike, though, with Mary and Margaret Haldane, the previous 2 people in one family murders, this time the grandson, the boy, he was a literal child. In Burke's later testimony, he would state it was the murder of the little boy that stuck with him and haunted his dreams the most. Unlikely he wasn't being completely honest, he was probably just looking for sympathy there. I don't think anybody gives a shit about what's haunting his dreams. I mean, he's literally admitting to killing a child. So while his grandmother was burked in the bedroom, the boy sat in the adjoining room beside the fire, completely unaware. Pretty horrifying. And then once the woman was dead, the boy was taken to the same room and killed too. Rather than burking him, though, the men just broke his neck.
Jesus Christ, that's horrendous.
Yeah. Exactly how they did that, it's unknown, not that you would want to know. And this was the first time Burke and Hare had killed 2 people at once, so the usual T-chest method wasn't enough to accommodate the extra body. Instead, the men got a hold of an old barrel that had been used to store and move fish to get the bodies to Knox's office, where they received £16 for the grandmother and grandson. The barrel transport didn't exactly go smoothly, by the way. Burke and Hare had to load the barrel up onto a horse-drawn cart, as they had with the tea-chest before. But the horse wasn't up to the extra weight, and pulled up soon after. The men were then forced to call on a porter to help take the barrel the rest of the way. I love the way they had to get help to move the dead body barrel.
Right.
And by the way, the extra expense of hiring this porter and the inconvenience, it made Hare furious. He flew into a rage, and once back at the Hare's home, he shot the horse dead in the court. He was so pissed off, he shot the horse in the head.
Jeez. And then Burke and Hare, they proceeded to put a dress on the horse and sold to Knox for £10.
At the end of June, Burke and Hare had a serious falling out stemming from, well, basically both of them undertaking their own solo endeavors and keeping the cash for themselves. Apparently, killing alone, by the way, was fine. They didn't have a problem with that. They had a problem with keeping the cash to themselves and not sharing it.
Yeah.
No can do, Butterino. See, one interesting incident happened was that shortly before Burke and Nell McDougall went to see her father in June, when they were leaving, Burke and Nell knew that Hare, having drunk and flittered away his earnings from the most recent bodies, They knew Hare had been short on cash and struggling to make ends meet. However, when Burke and Nell McDougall got back after visiting her father, it wasn't the same old Hare. Before they left, Hare had been so broke he had pawned several items of clothing. When the Burkes got back though, Hare was wearing brand new treads and flush with cash. When Burke asked him if he'd paid a visit to Knox, Hare flat out lied and said no. A quick check with Knox though confirmed that was a lie, as Knox told Burke he had bought a woman's body from Hare from £8. So again, Burke was furious that Hare was killing and selling bodies without him knowing about it and sharing the cash, and so things ended up actually turning physical. And for a short time, the blood was so bad between them that Burke and his wife, Nell McDougall, moved into a house 2 streets away. They moved into a house with a man named John Brogan, who was Burke's cousin. They moved there for a short time because about like a month, maybe 2 months later, they were back in business, baby.
I just missed you too much.
Yeah. The next murder happened at John Brogan's place where Burke and his wife Nell McDougall were staying. Hare just happened to visit over and he popped over. We're friends again.
Yeah.
You want to kill somebody here? This looks like a pretty sweet digs. Let's do some killing. The next victim was an elderly washerwoman named Mrs. Ostler. The men used the usual tactic of whiskey and burking and traded in the cadaver for £8. Very soon after, roughly a week or so, the men's killing spree escalated with another dark turn where they killed not only someone known to them, but someone related to them. Specifically, it was a relative of Nellie McDougall's, Anne McDougall. Now, Anne McDougall wasn't a blood relative. She was a cousin of Nellie's ex-husband, but still, still sort of family. Still in that extended circle of...
Yeah, you'd see them at Christmas.
Yeah, exactly. You'd see them at the Christmas party.
Yes.
That's exactly it, yeah.
So despite the 2 men apparently being back on the same page, it was a very different story for their wives. So Hare's wife, Margaret, suggested to Burke and Hare that they might do away with their counterpart, Nellie.
See, it's that classic tale, the wives just don't get on.
Oh, right, I know.
You get these 2 bros, wives just
I know,
not on the same page.
Everyone it was so easy with just the 2 lads.
Yeah, it was the good old days.
She wanted to send Nellie after her recently departed cousin because Nellie, she was a Scot woman.
Ooh.
So Burke, Hare and Margaret, they were all Irish. And so that meant, they couldn't trust her.
Classic.
Now, she wasn't killed, but things were not all sunshine and peaches in their miserable, murderously, shitty Scottish house.
Exactly.
Far from. Yeah.
Far from. Yeah, you can see the cracks were starting to form now. They were getting greedy. There were a killer duo who went to killer solos who were not... They got pretty jealous that they were killing solo-y. And then they even started looking at killing everybody. It's like,
turn on themselves,
Yeah, Hammer only sees nails.
Yes.
The killer only sees victims. And they started looking closer and closer. And then it's... I guess maybe they were... Margaret here was the one who brought up killing Nellie. And I guess she was worried that, she might rat her out. Because she wasn't Irish.
Yeah.
Because Irish famously not tattletales, as we've seen before, So if anybody's going to rat it out, it's going to be the Scotch woman. But eventually they didn't. I mean, I guess Burke was not keen on them killing his wife Nellie.
It wasn't fun.
It was just a thought.
Just a thought, yeah.
Just shooting the shit here,
Maybe she was just trying to get in there before they did it to her.
So both Burke and Hare had gotten far too comfortable, though, with not being caught, and both very guilty of beginning to feel like they were invincible. Well, that and all the murders, obviously. They were very guilty of that, too. It was that complacency and tendency to shit where they ate, killing, 2 people in one family, killing people who would be recognized, killing family members, that would end up getting them caught and costing one of the couples their lives. With their blasé attitude toward killing, the next victim must have seemed like the easiest money yet. A local 18-year-old named James Wilson. James had either some form of learning or social issues, and was homeless as a result. He only survived on what little he was given or could beg for. That said, he was well known in the community because he was a friendly and inoffensive person. Among locals, he had the not-so-nice nickname of Daft Jamie, but given the times, could have been a lot worse,
That's true.
I don't think the name was even meant to be cruel. People were just ignorant back then of, certain people's difficulties. Despite James being considered simple, it's actually thought he was on the autism spectrum and maybe even had savantism.
Yeah. Apparently he was able to give very specific dates and numbers, making really fast calculations just off the top of the dome. And he would do this trick of sorts in exchange for food and donations or money or tobacco products.
Yeah, he's sort of like Rain Man.
Yeah.
If he was around today, he would be a billionaire, crypto bro billionaire AI guy. But back then, not so much. On top of his social issues, James also had a peculiar physical disability that made him stand out in a crowd as well. He had a deformation of his feet, which caused him to walk with an obvious limp. All of these things made him seem like he would be an easy night's work for Burke and Hare, but the men would soon learn they had underestimated him. The first issue was that James was not a big drinker. He would have the old, slug now and then, but he preferred to smoke and indulge in some snuff instead. So the offer of whiskey got James in the door. But they soon realized that they were not going to be able to get him as drunk as their previous victims. Regardless, the men went ahead, very likely thinking that the disabled boy wouldn't be able to put up much of a fight. And they were wrong. A big mistake on Burke and Hare's part. James fought the men ferociously, and he very nearly got away had he not been in the bedroom and so far from the front door, which Margaret had locked behind him. So he was basically locked in with Burke and Hare, and in the end, the two grown men were just too much for him to overcome, and so James was killed by being struck and then choked to death. The men went through the motions, stripping the body of any valuables, including James's snuff box, before they took the body over to Dr. Knox's office. And that's where, ding ding ding, James's uniqueness became a big problem for Burke and Hare. The men had never previously killed anyone so well known as James. So, the moment the doctor laid James's body out on his table, multiple students recognized him. When the students named him, oh hey, that's James, we've seen him around town, Dr. Knox said, oh no, you made a mistake. This wasn't James. But it was far too late. It was very obviously the man they'd walked past so many times, and several of them had even talked to James. The rumor mill quickly flew into overdrive, and word got around that Knox had daft Jamie on his table. In a panic and in order to rid himself of the evidence, Knox moved James's dissection up on the schedule. And he wasn't exactly subtle in the way he went about covering his tracks either. And if any more evidence was needed to prove that Dr. Knox was absolutely complicit in Burke and Hare's crimes, Knox kindly provided it. When, prior to James's body being dissected, he quickly removed the obvious identifying features, cutting off both James's head and his distinctive malformed feet.
Jesus.
Yeah, that's pretty grim.
Yeah.
It's like, nobody will know it will be him if I obviously disfigure this body. Dr. Knox definitely knew that they were serial killing on to get paid at this point.
He was covered up.
Yeah, and he was paying serial killers to kill for him, basically. Of course, rumors were rife after the incident, and the men should have laid low, especially after it became public that James hadn't been seen around town anymore. It really didn't help that people were seeing strangers strutting around town in clothing that previously belonged to James.
Now, the final victim of the spree was actually a fellow Irish immigrant named either Marjorie or Margaret Campbell Doherty. So it was the Irish connection that Burke and Hare, they exploited in order to get Margaret alone and away from other people. So Burke met the elderly woman while out drinking on the 31st of October, 1828. Halloween. So Burke, he got the woman talking and even told her that his mother was also named Doherty and from the same part of Ireland, so they were probably related. All of that was, of course, bollocks. There was a little hiccup in the plan though, as the Brogan lodging house where Burke was staying already had guests staying there. And you can't exactly go murdering when you've got company. Now McDougall joined Burke and Doherty, which gave Burke the opportunity to go out and find Hare. Fortunately, Burke had a great idea to get the guests out of the lodging house. He said, I've got an even better place for you to stay, my friend Hare's house. Go there for the night, celebrate Halloween, have a laugh, have some whiskey. And they did. It worked. They got the house all to themselves and they killed old Miss Doherty in the guest's room, hiding her body underneath the bed.
Now, the plan was to hide old Miss Doherty's till morning and then they could take it over to Dr. Knox at the university. However, this is when shit hit the wall for Burke and Hare. Remember, there was a couple staying at John Brogan's house, and remember, Burke had to get them out of there so they could kill Mrs. Doherty. The couple who were staying there, they were named the Greys, and the Greys had seen Doherty before they left, and they were surprised when they came back the following morning, and Mrs. Doherty's gone. They were like, where she was, where's she gone? We seen this old Irish woman last year. Where's she gone now? Hare quickly spun a tale that she had been making the moves on Burke, and Nellie McDougall was none too pleased. So they had to ask old Miss Doherty to leave. The Greys seemed to have been placated by the story, and that should have been that. However, At one point, Mrs. Gray remembered she had left something in the guest room, and she asked to retrieve it, only for Burke to aggressively refuse to let her into the room she and her husband had only stayed in, just previously. Burke was so dead set on not letting her pass that it immediately made the Grays think that something is not right here. The couple backed down, but then waited until Burke and Hare had left them alone before letting themselves back into that guest room. After a quick look around, they found Miss Doherty's body under the bed, complete with blood smeared on her face, on her mouth. The couple left quickly and went directly to the police station, where they told the constable on duty about the whole thing, finding a dead body under the bed. Unfortunately, in the short period of time between the Grays leaving and returning with the police, Burke and Hare had returned, retrieved Doherty's body, and dropped it off with Dr. Knox. The search did turn up Doherty's blood-stained clothing, though, which was enough to corroborate Gray's accusations and spark a full-on investigation.
There actually was a bit of a run-in between the Grays and Nellie McDougall while the couple were on their way to the police station. And Nellie, she tried and failed to bribe the couple into not reporting the grisly find in return for £10. Now, Burke, Hare and Nellie, they were questioned separately, and each said that Doherty had left under her own volition. But none of them could agree on the time that she'd left. Now, the police, they'd already caught them in a lie, and they had not yet begun their in-depth investigation. So it didn't take long at all for them to uncover the rumours about the disappearances at the Hare's lodging and reappeared local celebrities who had turned up on Dr. Knox's slab. So they'd hear it all about...
Yeah, you kind of wonder why it took them so long to hear about this, though. It's like, a lot of people started going missing and ending up here. It just seems weird that, this wasn't bigger. Because they were killing a lot of people.
Yes, they were, yeah.
And it was only by pure chance that, Mrs. Doherty's body was found by somebody who had just been staying in that room. And it's like, I actually just remembered I left something in the room. My watch in the room or whatever. She goes back into the room she had just been renting and finds a dead body under it. The Bobbies, or do they call them Bobbies in Scotland?
I don't know in Scotland actually. I'm not sure.
Scottish listeners, write into us.
Let us know.
Yeah, you think it's weird. I just feel like this should have been bigger news earlier on that people were going missing. It was then the next morning that the police would go to Dr. Knox's office and discover Doherty's body there. They called in Mr. Gray, who, had been at the guest house, and he identified her as being the body they had found under the bed in the bedroom. So now Burke, Hare, Margaret, and John Brogan, who owned the guest house, they were all arrested, and all of them denied any knowledge of any of the murders. Now, John Brogan, who was Burke's cousin and he owned the house, he was soon released with no evidence being found against him. And who knows if he knew that there was people being killed in his house. We don't really know that at all. Burke, Hare, and Margaret, though, they were soon joined by Nellie McDougall, and the four of them were held while the investigation dug into the last year of their lives and began to uncover the long trail of people who had checked into Hare's accommodation but never checked out. The first big step was the same it would be now. To lock down the suspects into their story and start seeing where them differences occur. Each of the four accused gave a different account to it. The usual shite, like differences in times, differences of why the lodgers suddenly upped and left and were never seen again, different names even. None of their stories matched about the people who went missing in their general vicinity over the past year. The investigating detectives had already employed several surgeons to give them their opinions on Doherty's body. The first was the police's own in-house surgeon, and he was followed by two specialists in forensic pathology. Though none of them could say for certain, they all shared the opinion that Doherty had very likely been deliberately asphyxiated. So they knew that Doherty had been murdered. She hadn't just passed away or passed of an illness, so often seemed to happen around Burke and Hare.
Now you might be wondering about Dr. Knox. So, despite Knox having received 17 bodies...
17?
17,
It's a crazy number.
It's a huge amount. 16 of them were murdered. So, the first one was legit.
The first one was legit, somebody who died of a dropsy.
Yeah, so, legally, he may have walked away, somehow scot-free. But the court of public opinion ruled very differently. So, to many, he was seen as being the one who put the whole murderous spree into motion, fueled by his growing celebrity status in the medical community, which itself was based largely on his regularly very public dissections. So Knox was actually interviewed as to where he got these cadavers and where they came from. And he said that he truly believed that Burke and Hare had set themselves up as watching poorhouses and had simply taken the bodies before they could potentially be claimed by the family. that was pretty obvious it was bullshit, but there was no other way to prove otherwise.
Yeah, his excuse was that he thought, that's the dumbest.
Yeah.
He definitely knew they were killing people. There's they just set themselves outside poorhouses and just happened to get freaking 16 more bodies after the first one.
Are you sure about that?
So when newspapers got a hold of the story, they immediately blew the already huge story out of all proportion. And suddenly, anyone who had gone missing in the entirety of Scotland was being treated as a potential victim. People who weren't even missing were being reported as victims. Hysteria was catching on and spreading like wildfire. The police knew they needed to get the case tidied up, and quickly. This is when the lack of evidence, it actually really kicked the investigation backwards quite a few steps. See, the fact was, there were no bodies. They all had been dissected and disposed of by, the university in Edinburgh. And even if they did have the bodies of the people Burke and Hare killed, they'd all been medically dissected. So it would have been impossible to say they were murder victims.
Yes. Yeah.
You can't tell how they died when the bodies have been chopped up.
Yeah.
So officials did have some physical evidence that would have been of use today, mainly several items of clothing and personal items belonging to the dead. But of course, this is freaking 200 years ago. There was no way of, testing any of these things. DNA hadn't even been invented yet.
Yeah.
There was nothing to stop Burke, Hare, Margaret, and Nellie from simply claiming to have bought the items fair and square. Clothing or other items that they had that belonged to the victims. Eventually, the man in charge of prosecuting the charges decided to make Hare and his wife Margaret an offer. Give a full confession, implicate Burke, and you will go free. A man and his wife, who had both played a major part in killing nearly 20 people, were offered complete immunity in return for turning in King's evidence. So as for Nellie McDougall, Burke's wife, both Hare and Margaret, along with Burke, they all refused to implicate Nellie in any of the murders. So there would be a bit of a trial for her, but basically Nellie would eventually walk free too. Strangely enough, that was pretty sound of them. To not implicate. I mean, obviously Burke wouldn't implicate his wife. He would say she had no part in it. Yeah. But Hare didn't, and neither did Margaret implicate her. And Margaret wanted her dead at one point and suggested we kill Nellie.
Yeah.
So that was kind of interesting. Out of the 5 people, Burke, Hare, Nellie McDougall, Margaret Hare, and Dr. Knox, all of them had been complicit in the murders. Only one person, Burke, would be in the firing line. The trial came quickly and was certainly a speedy affair. It took less than an hour for the jury to return with their verdict, guilty for Burke. While passing sentence, the judge told the court and William Burke, "Your body should be publicly dissected and anatomized. And I trust that if it is ever customary to preserve skeletons, yours will be preserved, in order that posterity may keep in remembrance of your atrocious crimes." Yeah, Burke would have been doomed before the trial even began anyways. All the legal proceedings did was make it official. Burke had his one-way ticket to the hot place, and that was that. And Burke, he was hanged January 28th, 1829. Man, the whole story happens very quickly. I mean, they got their first body to Dr. Knox in November 1827. They did most of their killing in 1828, and then in January 1829.
Yeah.
Short drop, quick stop.
Yep, that's it.
The hanging was even more of a spectacle than the trial had been. Estimates aren't exact, but some of those in attendance have it as many as 25,000 people crowded the streets of Edinburgh to watch his neck go, bam, dude. Matt, well, I mean, there's what do you do before TV, huh?
Right,
You gotta keep yourself entertained somehow. Tickets were literally sold to witness Burke die, with the surrounding tenement buildings hiring out rooms with window views of the Hangman's Square, specifically for Burke's execution. Pretty dark, but as I said, really just was fucking nothing to do back then.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Gotta make your own entertainment.
In a sweet twist of irony, Burke's body was then transported to the University of Edinburgh on the 1st of February, where it was dissected before a crowd, and several trophies were also taken. Like at the trial and execution, the dissection also caused a headache for the police when pretty much every student tried to get in to see the procedure. So police had to step in to defuse the situation. Some sources even have things going so far as becoming a riot before the crowd could be controlled. There was also a notebook that was bound with Burke's skin, that's metal as shit.
It is cool as all hell.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Burke's skeleton and cast of his head was then given to Edinburgh University's medical school, which still resides there to this day.
If we do make a trip to Edinburgh, we should go have a gander.
I was just about to say, I wonder if you can get in and see it. That'd be cool.
Okay, I'm going to Google that right now. There's a William Burke Museum. There's a specimen jar containing William Burke's brain. You can see a cast of his head. I'm Googling imaging it. What? Is that his head? What the fuck is it? Wow. And yeah, I'm seeing a death mask of William Burke and a life mask of William Hare. Honestly, folks, if you're wondering what Burke and Hare look like, pretty regular looking fellows. Not really that interesting looking. Swiftly moving on. So Nellie McDougall, what became of her, Burke's wife? Well, she may have walked free from court, and remember, nobody was willing for some reason to implicate Nellie McDougall at all, except the public. They were not too swayed. Nellie McDougall was actually forced into police protection the very next day after walking free, after an angry mob chased her down. The crowd blocked the local police station and demanded she be sent out to them, which forced her to have to escape out of a back window and go into hiding. What became of her after that is basically rumor and folktale. We do know that she tried to visit her husband Burke prior to his execution, but she was refused a meeting. Rumor has it that she later fled to Australia. William Hare, he remained in custody during and after Burke's trial and was forced to remain there even after Burke was hanged. The threat to his life was taken very seriously, but the police couldn't protect him forever. Not that they really wanted to anyway. I mean, he was just as guilty as Burke, he just happened to get a better deal. He was eventually released on February 5th, 1829, though not without great difficulty. He was only able to leave thanks to a plan put together by the police to sneak him out in a mail coach. Unfortunately for Hare, despite wearing a disguise, when the coach stopped, he was spotted by a man who recognized him, and he was chased yet again. Once again, the police had to come in and save him, though not without a great deal of unrest. It's quite amazing, really, that he wasn't lynched, to be honest. What became of Hare after that is uncertain. Many believe he was helped over the border into England. That's what the police were telling him to do. After that, though, no one knows. One story has Hare being thrown into a lime pit by a furious mob. Half blinded by this incident, he apparently spent the rest of his days as a beggar in London. As for Margaret Hare, she too was attacked by an angry crowd on her release, though she'd eventually make it out of Scotland and back to Ireland. After that, though, nobody knows what happened to Margaret. Dr. Knox, he was forced to leave Edinburgh. His once high regard was now a thing of the past, and his shiny reputation in tatters. Dr. Knox moved to London in order to try and rebuild his life. However, he was unable to escape the notoriety of the murders, and never again achieved the levels of success he once had. Knox even became something of a celebrity, but certainly not in the way he hoped. Newspapers around Scotland featured the tale of Burke and Hare and Knox. Unlike today, contemporary accounts place almost equal blame on the doctor, so history has been kind to Dr. Knox. The people back then thought he was a lot worse than usually you hear about today. Cartoons at the time, back in the 1820s, they depicted Dr. Knox as a literal butcher, gleefully cutting up the meat that Burke and Hare brought to him. And there you have it, folks. That is the story of Burke and Hare, and we should really say it, and Dr. Knox too.
Oh, he was definitely on that.
Yeah, he for sure knew. But that'll do it for today's whole episode, folks. Thank you so much for listening to me and Dirty Keith yammering on today. I hope you enjoyed this whole episode, and you know what? We will be talking to you pretty soon.
Yeah. Well,
all right, there you go. Thanks, folks. Bye.